One of the biggest problems some of the early legal cannabis growers had in the US was how do they deal with all the cash they're getting. There has been, and still is in some places, a federal ban with banking in regards to cannabis growers. So cannabis growers had to sell everything for cash, though it was legal for them statewide, but they had to sell everything for cash and banks wouldn't take their cash. So in this video, I'm sitting down with Pat Kane of Clutch Hemp Co. and we're talking about how they dealt with all those problems. What do you do with all this money? And this is a segment of a two-part series that I did with Clutch, talking about their operation. The first one, we walked around the whole operation and really looked at the whole mother nursery part of the operation, where you basically have a mother plant, and then that gets cloned many times to make all of the transplants that go out in the field. And this operation is predominantly CBD, and I believe they're making hemp fiber now. But it's a very successful business with huge profit margins. And if you're interested in cannabis growing, you're going to want to check this series out that we did it from the field. I hope to do more videos with Pat in the future. He's a former student of mine, and I really liked his approach to running his business. I think it was truly a regenerative model. He talks a lot more about that in the longer form videos I did with him. But in this video, we're talking about how you deal with all this extra cash. So if you guys want to see more stuff like this, head over to fromthefield.farm. There is a link in the show notes. The registration is open until October 18th, and each day up until that point, I'm releasing a subject video from the site, so you can check that out. It's risk-free. If you sign up within the first 30 days, if you decide you don't like it, you can cancel. No hard feelings, no questions asked. All right, guys, enjoy this one. I want to explore a little bit more, we talked about this earlier, but I want to explore a bit more of what you had to go through to get financing. Like you said, you bootstrapped the first 6 months. Your career as a doctor, you know, you were making decent money, so you did that, you put a lot on the line. But to scale it to where it is now, there's a lot of infrastructure with this organization. We're only showing like a tiny percentage of it here. What did you have to do to go get money? Because you couldn't go to the banks.
Yeah, so you can't go to the banks. We were helped by the fact that in late November, early December, people had a pretty good idea that the Farm Bill was going to pass. It was just a matter of when. Was it going to happen in 2018? Was it going to happen in 2019? And so we had enough of a track record. We had a lab up and running. We had people buying and using our tolling. We had people who knew us in the industry, who liked our product, who said, you know, you guys are doing it the proper way. And so essentially what you have to do is you have to build a business plan. And so we put together about a 55-page business plan that lays out why we're better in the industry, what we're doing, what innovations we're making, how we're covering our risks. And then you just have to take that out on the road. And so you go to friends of friends, you go to people who are in the cannabis space already. You look at people who already are familiar in high-risk lending. You know, maybe they're a casino, maybe they have, you know, ties to gambling or one of those higher risk industries. And you look for people who are familiar with that risk, who are interested in innovating. And people who really have done it previously is what you want to find. And so we went out, we probably had 6 or 7 different groups that we talked to, and then we ultimately decided on one.
Wow. And there was, you were telling me earlier, there was a credit union that was like the only bank that would give you guys money.
Yeah, so initially just to have a bank account was
Just to have a bank
impossible.
account,
Yeah,
right,
so they're
okay.
not giving us anything. They're
Right.
holding our money and they're investing our money. But to even get a bank account was very difficult. So I had to go around different CEOs of the banks in town and explain what it is and explain what the Farm Bill allowed and explain that it's no longer federally illegal and explain the checks and balances to make sure that we're within state regulations. And it probably took me 2 months before I could get somebody to agree to give us a bank account.
Wow. And this is one of these things that creates, we were talking about this morning, creates a massive amount of, I don't know if the term is racketeering, but the fact that people still just can't do anything with their cash.
Right.
So you get these people that have these operations that have tons of cash, and it creates this sort of vacuum. Is because it's so regulated, it creates an opportunity for people to launder massive amounts of cash. So even though you're technically legal in the state of Colorado, there's still a lot of illegal activity happening in the whole space, right?
Yeah, really, it's getting better all the time, but especially 2 years ago when we started this, there was very much, you could never have a bank account. So everybody had safes and everybody knew who was growing hemp. And so criminals would target those households because they knew there were large amounts of cash there. And then you have to go, even my bankers now, some of my employees, they can't get their checks cashed because it says Clutch Hemp Company. And so, then I gotta, what do? We gotta send them to a different bank. And then, some of our customers only have cash. And then, if you're a farmer that can't get a bank account and you need to buy clones or you need to buy seeds for that season, you pay $75,000 or $100,000 in cash. And so I was I was literally getting bags of cash, and I'd have to go down to the bank and fill out IRS forms and put the social security number of the farmer that I got it from. And it takes 25 minutes to do a deposit.
Unreal. And does that create, so these operations, these hemp farmers, they're processing massive amounts of cash. Are there, like, call it gangsters, whatever, guys that only deal in cash? Are they sometimes trying to funnel money into other operations because these certain operations can process large amounts of cash? So is that essentially, has the government in a way created a money laundering environment?
I think it has to. I mean, when you look at the cannabis industry on the marijuana side, to this day, there are dispensaries that can't deal in anything except for cash.
Oh yeah, we've gone to some of them.
And so the paperwork and the stuff they have to do to not show, to show that they are not money laundering is excessive, and it can actually force you out of business.
Wow.
The amount of accounting you have to do, the amount of double and triple checking you have to do, the amount of files you have to form with the IRS, and then even just the difficulty of paying taxes.
Right.
So, I dealt with friends up in Oregon where they would have to drive to Seattle, that's where the IRS office is, drive to Seattle with a Rubbermaid of cash so they can pay their yearly taxes.
They're paying their taxes in cash.
Yeah, because if you're on the marijuana side, you can't even exchange cash for a cashier's check at a bank, because then that is considered money laundering in some aspect.
Wow. So they're trying, the state is really trying to make it hard for people to do that. But so does that mean that it's very difficult to launder money then? But does it still happen?
I am sure it happens.
Right.
Anytime you give somebody that opportunity, they're going to find a way to make it happen.
They're going to find a way to do it.
And the states and some aspects of government are really trying to change that. So there's a law currently in Congress that makes it safe to use banking. Just clarifies that point, because there's no clarity on it. So there are pieces of legislation, most of which are coming out of Colorado and Oregon and working their way up to the national level. It's called Safe Banking Act. It allows for people in the cannabis space to use banks, and so that way we can really cut down on this kind of behavior.
Yeah, because it's funny how that regulation just creates more crime, because it means anybody who is operating a business where they're forced to use cash are now a huge target.
Yeah.
to getting robbed, murdered, who knows?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, just transporting this material because it's so high value, and then if you also have to deal with the cash aspect of it, it just breeds, you know, a very difficult security situation. So that actually opens up an entire different industry. There's an entire industry that transports hemp around the country.
Right. Yeah, and that's what regulatory. I guess that's where the term regulatory capture comes from. Is that by certain regulations being built, you create all these new industries where people are like the troll on the bridge kind of thing, the toll collector, you know.
Yeah. So there's a lot of middlemen. You know, all of our deals go through escrow accounts because we need to make sure that our buyer actually has the cash that they say they're going to have. You know. You don't just take it on good word that they're good for $2.5 million a week, right? So we have all of these middlemen and these middle escrow accounts where they put the money into the account. We can see the money in the account. As we ship the material, we can pull the money out of the account. And so it adds all these layers and layers. And brokers are crazy in this business.
Really?
Because they kind of act as that middleman. They verify the funds on this side, they verify the product on this side, and then they link the people up and they take, you know, between 3 and 5%.
So there's a lot of rent seeking happening in this environment.
Yep.
And I guess that's part of what's allowing you guys to win in this space is the fact that you have so much margin that you can afford to pay the piper a little bit there. But in the marijuana industry, their margins are so thin, and there's so many variables of points of risk that there's just very little redundancy built into it, because if any of these things screw up, they could go bankrupt overnight.
One little fall can really hit you hard.